Growing up, I was always a curious child. I always wondered what was behind of all the authorized personnel-only doors and in the classified folders. It didn't have to be anything secret to attract my attention. It just had to be out of my reach to get me wondering about it. As I grew up, my curiosity only grew stronger. So much so that when it was time to go to college, I'd chosen a computer engineering major, despite the fact that most IT and programming jobs are being outsourced. All that mattered to me was that being a programmer, I would get the behind-the-scenes look at the biggest pool of information in the world, the internet. And this natural curiosity of mine was the cause of the chain of events that made me kill that homeless man. Not directly. I really didn't want to kill him, or anybody in particular, but at the time, it seemed like the only way out. How else would I be sure that she'd leave me alone? Anyhow, it all started on a bus, back when I was still attending UNT, a fairly large university in Dallas. By the time I was done with classes, it was around 6 in the evening and I was exhausted, with barely enough energy to get on the almost empty bus. Aside from the driver, it had a teenage couple sitting at the very back watching something on a cell phone, and an elderly woman sitting close to the driver, reading a Stephen King book. Naturally, I proceeded to sit down in one of the seats in the middle, spacing myself evenly away from the others. I just put my headphones on and started looking through the window, mostly spacing out. As the bus was passing the downtown area, I started looking at the skyscrapers, dreaming about a corner office in one of them someday. All of a sudden, I saw a silhouette of a girl emerge. It was dark and transparent. The girl was looking at something. My first thought was that she was just standing behind me, and I was just seeing the reflection of her in the window. I quickly turned around, but there was nobody behind me. I looked around, and the couple was there, as was the old lady up front, just peacefully reading her book. I didn't know what to do. Yelling would just have been weird. Besides, it might just have been a trick that my brain was playing on me, as a revenge for 6 classes a semester and long nights of online gaming. Calming myself down, I slowly turned around. The girl was there. She didn't move. She didn't even look at me. She was looking at the empty seat next to mine. I turned around once more to inspect the seat and I didn't find anything. I looked back at the window. The girl didn't move an inch. Her calm face seemed scarier to me than any other expression imaginable. She looked young, maybe 12 or so, wearing, as far as I could tell, a gray hoodie, but I couldn't see much more. But she didn't seem even remotely from the past like I would imagine a ghost to look. Her eyes, her pitch-black eyes were locked at the same point. I tried my hardest to trace her look that was piercing through me, as if I wasn't there at all. But deep inside, I felt as if the girl wanted me to see what she was seeing. Finally, I looked at the gap between the seats and I found a memory stick. The micro one that's usually on a smartphone. When I turned around again, the girl was no longer there. This must have been it. She wanted me to find this memory card. Still being frightened by the silhouette that I saw, I started thinking that this must have just been a coincidence. After all, how many ghosts do you know that are dressed in modern clothes and reveal themselves to help you find a piece of digital technology? When I got home, it was already around 9. The rain that I thought would start a lot earlier just now started pouring, and I could see the lightning flash even through the closed blinds. I lived alone in a 1-bedroom condo my grandma left my family when she passed away. This place was the main reason I moved away from my parents. It was my first shot at independent life. I loved the place since I could remember myself. It was in between other condos and trees, so the light almost never came through. Furnished in a Victorian style, it had a hint of darkness to it, and such surrounding noise helped me think and be productive. The only downside to it was that no friend I'd ever brought home ever came back there again. But I didn't really mind. I liked being alone. Especially during a storm, such as the one that was just about to start. I put the kettle on the stove to start making some tea. I laid back on the couch and I reached for my phone. As I was grabbing my phone, I felt something beside it. Something tiny and thin. The flashcard. I'd almost forgotten about it. And frankly, if it wasn't in the pocket, I would have soon forgot about the girl in the window. I pulled out the card and I took a look at it. Nothing special. Just a plain microSD card. 256 megabytes. The basic one. The kind that just comes with the standard phone. The kind you change for something better the same day you buy the phone. The kind that just sits in your desk drawer for years and never once used. The kettle whistled and I went to fix a cup of black tea with some lemon. Nothing in my opinion feels better than drinking some hot tea on a cold, rainy evening. Thinking about how cold and yucky it is in there while staying warm, dry, and sipping on a delicious cup of pure goodness. I brought the tea to the room and I left it on the desk. And then I came back for my phone and the memory card. I wasn't sure if I should do anything about it. On the other hand, I had already picking it up. I mean, it's not like I can just go put it back. Or could I? My natural curiosity got the best of me. I quickly swapped the memory card on my phone for the one I'd found on the bus and started anxiously waiting for the phone to read it. No new applications or pictures showed up on the phone. However, the video folder contained a new file. The thumbnail was black, so I could only guess what was on it. After a couple of seconds of hesitation, I decided to play the file after all. The screen was black. Nothing was happening for the first 5 seconds. But suddenly, I heard heavy breathing, a scratching noise, and finally a cry for help. Help me! Someone please! This is not funny anymore. The voice sounded desperate and loud. It was high-pitched enough to belong to a child, maybe even the girl on the bus. Suddenly, the screen got green, like in the video that is shot in infrared. I could only see her now. It was that same black-eyed girl that I'd seen earlier today. The camera was positioned a few inches from her head, and the girl herself was laying down on some soft fabric. I could only see her face, a nicely decorated pillow and more fabric on top. I couldn't tell the colors. All I could see is her laying between the two walls of fabric, crying for help. The moments the girl wouldn't cry, I couldn't hear a thing, just a breath. It was dark and quiet. The top wall seemed curved, just like a coffin. Could it be? Could someone have actually buried her alive and chose to film it? But why would they do that? And why leave in such a horrifying video on the bus? And why did she help me find it? I kept watching, hoping to see a slightest hint that it was just a prank, just somebody's sick joke. At one moment, the girl stopped crying and turned her head to the right, looking straight into the camera, and she whispered, "Help me." She was looking right through me, as though she knew I was watching. The video then abruptly ended. I put the phone on the table and I grabbed the teacup. It was only now that I've noticed how much my hands shake. I literally could not hold it without spilling tea on the desk, so I just put it back. Starting navigation to Richland Cemetery, my GPS stated. I looked back at my phone. The GPS was set for the cemetery on the other side of town. It or she. Something wanted me to go there. Maybe rescue her. I opened up my laptop and I looked at the cemetery. I searched the recent obituaries, nervously scrolling through the page. 1924 to 2013. 1935 to 2013. 1966 to 2013. I couldn't find anybody younger than 30 buried here in months. Maybe this was just all in my head. If not, it's just a prank. It has to be. I turned off the GPS and I got on Netflix, hoping that the season of a good show on a Friday night will wipe this memory and I'll start tomorrow with a clean slate. I was awakened by a phone notification. My phone was buzzing as though somebody kept texting or messaging me on Facebook. This was rather annoying. Anybody who knows me well enough to text me knows that I will never be up at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. My dungeon dark condo didn't let a single sunbeam in, so I could rest safe and sound, like Count Dracula in his coffin. Why did I shiver thinking about it right now? I reached for the phone and I picked at the bright screen. Something wanted to share my location. Probably just the map that updated overnight and now came out with the GPS feature. I agreed with the terms and conditions to shut it up, and I went back to sleep. After I had woke up and ate, it was time to fulfill my New Year's resolution. Run more. I barely started my grandma's old Mercury and headed to the nearest park. When I got to the park, there was just one other car there, and no wonder. All of the running trails were wet, and the cold wind was blowing especially strong today, as though near freezing temperature alone wasn't bad enough for me. But since I've decided to not make any excuses, I'd force myself out of the warm car. The park was dark despite the midday and not a single person in sight. The wind was blowing in my face, so I looked down and I slowly started to run. 2 songs into the run, I got to a narrow alley with a wall of tall bushes on both sides. Wind didn't freeze my face here as bad, so I could finally look up. What I saw ahead of me made me freeze like a deer in headlights. About 50 feet ahead of me, I saw the girl, and not the owner of the other car in the parking lot. She looked too young to be a driver. Her skin was pale, a gray hoodie and jeans were muddy. I froze, waiting for her to make her move. After a minute or so of silence, she started walking towards me. An unnatural animal fear took me over. I started sprinting back to the car, and the girl just walked. Every time I would turn around, she just seemed to walk, but each time the distance between us didn't seem to change a bit. By the time I ran up to the car, I didn't want an inch of distance between my pursuer and me. And my hands were shaking as I started to mess with the lock. By the time I opened the door, the girl was mostly 20 feet away. She now was walking even slower than before, almost as if she knew that I would not escape. I could see her much better now. It was not just her clothes that were muddy, so was her face, and that face was no longer neutral. It was furious. She was looking at me with her eyes that now were solid white with no sight of pupils or iris. Dirt in her hair, her hands and nails. They were hanging on the hands attached by some of the skin. Some nails were missing as though she was scratching them on something. Like a coffin lid, no. This is impossible. I've read somewhere that it is impossible to get out of a buried coffin alive. I wasn't sure if she was alive though. I jumped in the car and I slammed the door shut. A couple of spins of the starter, no sound of the pistons firing. There was a reason I took a bus to college. This car would never start when I needed it most. The girl was now near the trunk. I closed my eyes, floored the gas pedal, and turned the ignition key again. The old Grand Marquis roared. I shifted it into drive and I took off the moment the girl reached for the door handle. I got home at least twice as fast as I got to the park. I ran the lights and I didn't care for the speed limit. If anything, an officer pulling me over would comfort me. Though sitting in a metal cage at the back of a squad car driven by an armed officer didn't seem too bad at all at the moment. As I closed the car door, something seemed odd. It was the handle, or more specifically, the absence of the handle. Could that have been when the girl grabbed the handle and she ripped it off? I had no intention of staying in the condo for too long. I grabbed my laptop, some basic clothing, and a couple of energy drinks. I wanted to go home. If I was going to die, I wanted to spend the little time I got left with my family. A car alarm went off, but I paid little attention. I needed to get away from this place as fast as possible. I opened the condo door again, ready to head to the car when I saw her. She was standing there next to my car, and the driver's side window was broken. The alarm that was going off had turned out to be mine. There were imprints of the dirt on my light gray cloth driver's seat. My heart started racing as I slammed the door shut from the inside and I locked both of the locks. My alarm timed out and I stopped panicking. How did she find me? How did she know I was on a trail? Knows where my car is, but not where I live. I decided to call my only friend in the city to come and pick me up, but my cell phone was nowhere to be found. Thankfully though, Grandma being old-fashioned had a landline. I didn't know my friend's number, but at least I could call my phone. After the first beep in the phone, I had heard the same car alarm go off. I looked through the people and saw the girl beating on my car and reaching inside. And by her chaotic moves, I could tell she was blind. And that's when it hit me. The cell phone. I had taken it with me on the run and I left it in the car. She didn't know where I was, she just knew the phone's location. This scientifically made little to no sense to me, but I was not going to question it when my life was on the line. I sat on the couch and started praying as far as I can recall, for the first time in my life. In 10 minutes or so, the car alarm had turned off. I slowly stepped outside and made my way to the car, constantly looking around. When I opened the door, there was glass and dirt everywhere. I swept all that I could to the seat and I started the engine. I didn't know for how long she'd left me alone and if my phone is the only way that she could track me. But I didn't want to take any chances, so I decided to leave Dallas and go back to my family. The traffic was heavy and the traffic light would only let about 5 cars through at a time. And my phone was turned off and I kept staring at it. And in my mirror, expecting something supernatural to scare me to death one way or another. "Spare some change," the old man had said. I had never talked to homeless people at any traffic light before. I wouldn't roll my window down. But since this time my windows were gone, the man approached me unsolicited. Pardon me?" I said, trying to get my thoughts together and snap back to reality. "Could you please spare some change for some food?" The man had said. He looked very pleasant, the kind of guy who could play Santa Claus if he was to wash his beard and put on a couple of pounds. His face, despite all the troubles of life he must have been through, still looked very kind and appealing. I'll do you one better, man," I said, looking at my phone. "Here, take it." I handed the homeless man my phone. "I don't have any change on me, but you can sell this for some money." As the man with a genuine smile thanked me, I tried to look away. I was ashamed of putting him in danger, but all I could think about was this girl who was still on my trail. The girl who was able to crawl to the grave and could easily break into my car. As I had finally got to the highway, all I could think about was the old man selling the phone to someone who deserved to die, or to someone who would throw it away or recycle it. And those thoughts helped me deal with the guilty conscience. 6 months later, I was at Texas Tech, on the other side of the state, still far away from my parents, but thankfully as far from Dallas and Richland Cemetery and my condo as possible. I was about to get lunch when I received a call from a Dallas area code phone number. The shivers went down my spine as the memories of the winter events reemerged. I let it go to voicemail, and as soon as I got the notification about my new voicemail, I immediately opened it. "My name is Officer Williams," the voice said. "I believe we recovered your cell phone and we'd like to ask you a few questions." The officer proceeded to ask me to show up to one of the police departments in Dallas at my early convenience. Being anxious about what the police had wanted with me, I headed to Dallas the same day to show up to the department the following morning. I was led into the offices of one of the detectives. "My name is Officer Williams," said a sharply dressed man in a suit. "I was the one who left you the voicemail. Now tell me, what happened to your phone?" I lost it." "Where?" said the detective. "Oh, just around my condo. I must have been taking out the trash or running late to school and I didn't notice it falling out." The detective looked very disappointed. Not with me, but with my answers. She was clearly hoping for some promising clues. "We'd found your phone on an elderly homeless man. I don't assume you know him, but nevertheless, could you look at the pictures and tell me if you've ever seen him around?" She proceeded to hand me a folder but stopped at the very last moment. "These pictures are pretty graphic. You don't have to look at them if you don't want to," she warned. "Oh, it's okay," I replied, taking the folder. Inside were 3 pictures. And just by the first glance, I could tell it was the same guy I had handed my phone to. A medium-built old man with a long white beard. The first picture was him laying on the ground, and then another, a face close up and his eyes were closed, and white just like the girl's. His hair and beard were black from dirt, so much that I could barely tell that they were gray before. The other picture was one of his hands, all bloody and missing nails. Some fingers were bent in an unnatural shape, as if they were broken. She did to him as they did to her. I whispered. "What did you say?" asked the officer. "Oh, nothing. I've never met this man," I replied. I drove out of Dallas in silence. I was angry at myself, at the girl, at the memory card. I didn't even know the old man. I don't know where he's buried. I can't send him flowers or say thanks, but I will be forever in debt to him for taking my fate on himself. From there on, I spent a lot of time volunteering at the soup kitchens and ended up changing my major to human sciences and becoming a social worker, working with the homeless and trying to repay the debt that I owed to the one kind old man.